Hello everyone, I welcome all those who joined us. My name is Olha Atamanova and I'm happy to welcome you in Ukraine Media Center today. So today we are going to talk about a very important topic. Today we are going to discuss one of the aspects in relation of recovery of our country. We all understand that recovery is the long-term process, and it is important to think about policies which will underpin the recovery and help us get through this process. So our politicians should think about algorithms which are going to take into account all aspects. Today we're going to talk about one of such aspects, about a gender component, and today we're going to have a presentation of the rapid assessment tool for gender mainstreaming in recovery program documents. I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. Today we have Nataliia Riabushenko, Network of Gender Advisors Coordinator, Yuliia Malko, PhD in Public Administration, expert on gender-oriented governance, and also today we have Nataliia Sviderska, who is a National Consultant on Gender-Responsive Budgeting. Thank you for being with us today. Nataliia, let's start this talk from you. I think it is important to start from the issue why it is important to take into account a gender aspect in different programs related to recovery of our country. Hello everyone, thank you for the question. Yes, today we are in the situation when, we see active hostilities, an active phase of our work. It's a long-term work, however, the recovery of our country is already on our agenda. Ukraine has one of the values which is outlined in our constitution: gender equality, freedom, human rights, and opportunity to implement them. Ukraine had a very long path, and we are still moving along it, of creation of different normative documents, of external obligations, implementation to take into account everyone's needs. So gender issues is one of the issues which is important in this regard. Well, the programs and the plans which are related to Euro integration of our country and Euro-Atlantic integration of our country, they all have this component which is about hearing and seeing each and every one. Decentralization also covers this topic. As gender experts with the Bureau of Gender Strategies and Budgeting, with the support of an additional project, we been thinking about what we are going to do, and we had nothing to think about, because for us Euro integration and this idea is all about promoting human rights and gender equality between women and men. So recovery, Euro integration is always about people. We can learn important lessons from other countries, from Lithuania, from Moldova. We also have quite a significant experience ourselves. When number of documents are being elaborated by the state and by different regions and different communities, it is important to remember during this process that people are the center of all these activities. And even despite we have number of documents requiring us to conduct assessments, in practice we still have questions related to human resources, to their capacity, to their skills, even despite we have respective training programs for public authorities, civil servants, and respective workers in the field. Nevertheless, we need to have something which should work at the earliest stages of any program document development to see what it can touch upon. Well, if it touches upon any infrastructure or something like that. So we would see at the early stages what services will be introduced and how they're going to work for different people. This principle to build back better, it's all about services which will be for people, which will be not the same for all the people. In Lutsk, in Poltava, in Zolochiv, in any city or town of Ukraine, they will take into account all the needs of different people. So we develop a tool which is going to help us to see if we miss somebody, any group of people, and if not, we will be able to amend into this document, this draft of the document, because we all know that the document which is already adopted is difficult to amend. So at the early stages of development, it's always easier to take into account and to cover all those groups which we maybe missed when we started thinking about elaboration of the document. So this tool helps us to see everything we can miss. This is a desk study which with the inclusion of gender experts from different public authorities, civil society and different CSOs organizations to help to create better document for people and about people. So we would speak that all the resources and funds we spend, they really make change, they really make a difference. They change the situation, especially today when we speak that the issue of integrity of the country and the service level in our country, especially when we talk about return of our people from abroad, the comfort, safety, security, the future. It's all about that. This tool is a step towards all this. Thank you very much for this. I believe that, we often hear that some topics are not on our agenda as of today, but we have to remember that any democratic country, first of all, is taking care about human rights. So everything what you've mentioned, it is important in this context in order to really not to forget about the most important, because, yes, we still fight for our survival, but nevertheless we don't have to forget about that. Milena, I kindly ask you to speak about introduction of gender-based issues, gender mainstreaming issues into all these activities. Yes, actually this tool is really helpful in working with public authorities. It really helps. I'd like to underline this work. It's not about criticism. It's not about what is really missing. It's about collaboration. We have to think together. How to improve some document which is being elaborated. We have to cover all the interests of different men and women. So this project became a continuation of analytical centers development, and after our study visit to Moldova, we've learned some experience, gained it, and Nataliia have provided us information. How do they cooperate with public authorities, and public authorities refer to them? Please help us to improve, please help us to make our work better. So we wanted to do something like that in Ukraine, having our own history, our own inputs, our own legislation, and to build up on that something significant and meaningful. And the result is quite promising. Our tool is positioned as a perspective of improved level of gender mainstreaming in programmatic documents. Because it's about, like hints. What can be the next step? It's not about some points, some indicators to understand how good we are. This is something to demonstrate how can we cover different interests. This tool is based on current legislative basis, on respective order of the Ministry of Social Policy, and I would say that our main message is about using this document for all those who really has experience in gender mainstreaming issues. So it would be useful for gender advisors, consultants, or gender experts who are working in-house or out-house of different organizations. These are people who don't have to study further what is hidden behind this or that point. And the tool provides some points for this or that step or measure and give hints what can be made next to improve the situation. Well, the project was developed in line with the policy making a life cycle, and we have developed 12 questions which help us to assess the situation. First, we define problems, then we develop and implement, then we monitor and assess, and afterwards we ensure continuity and sustainability. So these 4 steps help us to reach the best results. When we talk about the problem, we are talking not only about the problem, we are talking about statistical data disaggregated by sex, and do we use them when we elaborate some activities or specific streams of activities, because sometimes even having statistical data, we just talk about number of persons, but when we talk about, for example, IDPs, we remember that they are not only IDPs as such, they are men and women of different age, with different health condition. They move to different communities. That means that they have different conditions and access to different services. So all these 4 sub-stages, they have additional questions which help to unpack problematics and help to understand what better steps could be made. So the scores are provided from 1 to 4. You see an example on the screen from the initial or primary level gender mainstreaming. We understand that it is necessary at this stage, but we do nothing to implement specific measures because legislative framework outlines what should be, but unfortunately in practice it sometimes doesn't work. So the next stage is satisfactory, good, and excellent. Demonstrate how specific data is implemented into practice through activities, and we can see that from monitoring and assessment. So implementation of different initiatives could be assessed also through the budgets provided for this or that activities. However, it is important to understand how the situation of different groups has changed thanks to these actions. Also, there is some synchronization of points according to specific approaches when we talk about points from 1 to 4. While with 1 point, it means that we have generally blind approach. We didn't want to make anything bad, but we only use an average statistic data. Well, but we understand that we don't have nothing like on average in our country, especially when we conduct policy making and decision making. If we are talking about number 2, when we have 2 scores, it means that there are some aspects which are already approved, but yes, they are gender sensitive, but unfortunately they lack an understanding how specifically they can be applied, or some target audience, for example, men and women, or men and women are targeted depending on the area and depending on the sphere of activity. As to the situation when we have score 3, it means that we already have specific measures that help to ensure gender equality. When we talk about gender transformative approach, it means that we understand that there are specific reasons for the problems we've analyzed and which we see as of today, and trying to impact these specific reasons, we can achieve specific results. And based on this scoring, we are able to amend respectively policy documents, and it helps to understand what could be the next step to improve the document or policy making process. And even it's not possible to do now, for the future, it gives more information for us. This tool is an entry point for cooperation with public authorities of state, oblast, or rayon level, self-governing authorities, and in territorial communities. I wish this cooperation to be productive and useful, both for those who advocate for changes and for those who elaborate them. That could be one of the options for establishment of common working group to cover all gender-sensitive issues. We also have to understand that rapid assessment is a desk study. In any case, we have to reach the stage of communication with public authorities. It doesn't matter if it may be when we send the report and over cooperation. That was the case when we've cooperated with one public authorities after we've read one of the drafts of policy documents. We have offered to meet with them and to discuss why we provided such a report, because sometimes in different public authorities they don't have gender consultants or gender experts, and they just don't have enough capacity to take into account all gender-sensitive issues. And sometimes they also don't understand how they can include gender-related issues into specific area. So communication is important here, and rapid assessment and report based on such assessment could be the first step for the meeting to make future documents better, more efficient in terms of taking into account the interests of different population groups, and in terms of better utilization of funds provided by donors into our state. Yuliia, well, is there a tool like that in the EU countries? Well, in Moldova, they actually use such a tool, and different ministries refer to them, and they use a rating score, so they have shared their experience, how can be applied in practice. And for me, it was quite a good example how civil society organizations can arrange a cooperation with different ministries. I think that this is the experience we should take over. And the Council of Europe, when they took the strategy on gender equality, they are already on this path for many years. And, it's already difficult to say what could be where this gender-based approach is outlined, well, taking into account European experience. And when we analyze it, we see that every country has chosen the model which is appropriate for that country specifically. So when we talk today about harmonizing Ukrainian legislation with the EU member states legislation, we have to think broader, because we have problems already at the stage of their development and drafting. Well, in some areas we see involvement of different levels, but nevertheless we cannot apply European experience 100% like just copying it, right? We have to identify our goals and set them, and to understand that we shouldn't concentrate on just an average person, like some unidentified person. To make legal drafting more gender sensitive, we have to take into account specific vulnerable groups. Well, we also have to remember that even despite lack of financial resources, we still have an opportunity to implement some elements which can be harmonized with the European ones. Well, if we talk about visions, about some gender-related aspects, we've already made some progress, but still more work is necessary. Thank you very much. Nataliia, let's talk about the application. Thank you. I'd like to talk about practical dimension. So as of today, the strategy of demographic development of Ukraine for 2040 has been adopted already, but that at the stage when we have engaged into the discussion regarding this document, we stepped in with this assessment. We went through all the stages which Yuliia have mentioned, and we've scored all the steps, and this is a teamwork, and we had discussions. We've learned this document. It looks quite simple to score the document, to give it some rating, but nevertheless it's a complicated and comprehensive task because it's a policy document, and it relates to many issues. So the first stage is distributed into different sub-stages. We start from identification and analysis of problems, and we start from data. Data is something which is important for any decision-making process. Without data, it's not possible to understand for whom this document should be prepared. Well, so let's talk about the principle, how it works in practice. After we read the document, we saw that there is a lot of data disaggregated by sex and age. Nevertheless, we have to remember that we have a martial law. Not all the information can be and should be open. But nevertheless, we saw that for this specific document, there was enough data, and it's not only men and women. There was data for other categories as well, and sometimes, unfortunately, data wasn't aligned between different chapters. And the next point is gender gaps and gender problems. So during that stage, we looked at gender needs and gaps, and any document should cover both basic and future needs. It should look into perspective, and the strategy is a strategic document. It's a document which should cover the future. At the next substage, we have identified that there were problems, there are gaps, and we had to identify what are the reasons, because if we talk about consequences and we don't see the roots of the problem, the document is not going to be effective. In this document, all this information was identified. There was information about a gap between life length of men and women, and this information also covered the style of life, and supported by statistical data. Of course, the next stage 2, is development of the document and its implementation. It is important to understand that gender policy includes participation component, participation of different groups which are covered by this document. Well, at that stage, it was a draft of the document. Again, I would like to remind that, and the openness of that document could mean its participative nature. Now the document is adopted already, and according to this document, an action plan is at the stage of the development, and after it will be ready, we can again assess what has changed. It is important in the course of the discussion not to lose what was elaborated, and it is also very important that when the state has adopted the document, they have identified that the plan is going to be developed in cooperation with the civil society. So we hope that we will be able to step in at some stage and to support this work. Well, not all these stages when we've been developing our tool, we looked broader. We looked at an ideal situation, but nevertheless, even when we skip some elements, it doesn't impact the whole picture. The next sub-stage is all about relations between this document and the European document and other Ukrainian documents. There should be synchronization between all the documents which have been adopted already and which are in the progress of elaboration. So they would take into account this document which is at the stage of the development. So we have references to the European documents, to the EU documents, and to Ukrainian documents as well. And the next sub-stage, the goal of the development of program document. Well, according to Ukrainian legislation, we don't have a defined structure of any strategic documents, so documents could be drafted in a different way. And also important thing to note, the articulation of the goal may not contain a word on gender policy or something like that. But when you read closer, when you read the text in the strategy, you can see principles which underpin the development of the document, and gender equality is among them. So it helps to understand that it actually covered this. So it is important to take into account all the text and all the elements of the document. So the tasks and the goals, and they can be articulated in different ways. There is no common name for this chapter. At that time, the document had 6 strategic goals. In the approved document, they have a bit different wording, but the overall goal is the same. Also, I'd like to note that there wasn't gender sensitivity mentioned anywhere in the document, but the plans of measures, they contain specific measures which are related to that. It is important to remember that the gaps which were identified at the very beginning of the document, they were covered throughout the document. Specific measures to ensure gender equality. Well, yes, we understand that sometimes some specific measures are necessary to support some specific vulnerable group, and this document covers that. In many Ukrainian documents of different levels, monitoring and evaluation stage is rather impractical. We haven't used to set criteria and to monitor what is the final result, what is the outcome of document implementation. Nevertheless, this document contains such provisions. So in this document, there is a separate chapter on monitoring and evaluation. There are specific indicators by gender, by age, and so on. The next substage, since it was a draft, and yes, as of now, action plan hasn't been approved yet, we couldn't assess financing measures. But now, after this document is approved, we can look at it once again and to check if it's there. Well, for this document not to be just a document, because we report toward the European Union, for us sustainability is important. Here we should remember about institutional mechanism and capacity, people, skillful people on respective positions who can support the implementation of this document. Ministry of Social Policy and Veteran Policy is responsible for implementation of this document. And as to gender policy, this ministry is one of the most important. That is why we understand that institutional continuity is ensured. And as a conclusion, I would say that when we're talking about scores, about ratings, we believe that this document is gender transformative. It's not just outlining that there is such problem. It identifies specific tasks, problems, and defines measures which can help to overcome them. And this document is directly related to recovery of Ukraine for those who is going to live and work in our country for its recovery. Nataliia, when you've been analyzing this document at the stage of its drafting, can you please tell me that all those elaborations, or at least partially or in full, were taken into account? For the document, we have prepared the assessment of the draft, and we've made a conclusion that it covers gender-related issues. But, there is no limit. We can work over and over and to improve the situation in the future. But it is very important to have respective financial resources in the action plan, which is going to be adopted next. Nevertheless, the draft, in our opinion, was quite gender-sensitive enough. It covers quite a lot of aspects, and just a few words additionally, we as gender issues experts, we can say that this document was one of the examples of quite comprehensive approach to covering different aspects of this problem in our society. I'd like to add that looking at discussions which we usually see in different groups after this document was approved, we see that they have the same thoughts, and the strategy shouldn't be too detailed. The plan should be detailed, but not the strategy and all the priorities and all the gaps which this strategy has identified and outlined. They are in line with priorities which our society sets out now. And now we are waiting for the development of an action plan, and according to the strategy, as Nataliia has mentioned, they all do reflect the analysis which is included into this document. And it's quite diverse because, sometimes it's a demographic strategy, and we can talk about improving the situation with births, but it won't solve the problem. It's not enough. It's not enough just to have more people. Yes, it's for a long-term perspective, but it won't solve all the problems. If we don't have infrastructure, we don't have safety, we don't have opportunities for finding jobs and so on, it will be difficult to talk about solving demographic problems. And European examples demonstrate that scenarios could be different. And in my opinion, it is so good that we see it. We see this discussion today, and in our opinion, this transformative nature of this document is not in covering a reproductive problem only, but it covers different issues related to infrastructure, healthcare, education, all those which impact demographics directly or indirectly. And it says that there is no magic pill which can help to solve the problem just tomorrow. It says that it's a long-term process, and we are aware that in 5 years the problem won't be solved, but it is important to see what will be the action plan. So, as I understand, as a basis, we looked at the strategy, which demonstrates that gender component was taken into account in full. But I believe that not all important documents in our country cover this gender-related aspect. Do we have any safeguards or something to do when the document has lower score comparing to this document? As Yuliia and Nataliia has mentioned, we have quite good legislative framework in our country, and many documents include gender expertise, gender analysis. But unfortunately, in practice, we see that qualified specialists are missing in respective organizations and places. And there was an initiative on improvement of the law on equal rights for men and women. There is a draft, and we hope it will go through all the processes which are necessary for its adoption, and it will confirm and will also set in the legislation the importance of respective mechanisms. Also, we see that there is a work on gender-sensitive infrastructure, and looking at Moldova, we saw that in their country different documents have the same or very similar structure. So they have, how to say, a template, an approach, a template for different documents. But yes, of course, specific is there. But in our country, we see problems with that. In our country, our laws, in some cases, they are very modern, in some areas they are not. We've seen different documents at the level of the state and at the level of specific oblasts and communities with different level of inclusion of this or that situation. Their structure is different as well. So we hope that once gender-sensitive issues will be included into this document and all the elements will be there, like goals, then measures, then financing for specific measures. All these issues will be covered, and also participation of communities, of experts from different areas in elaboration of different documents, in the drafting. It's always easier to implement amendments and to implement some important issues. So in draft of Volyn Oblast draft, we saw that the gender passport, where they identified gender gaps, and they have included a reference to it in their strategy, and we provided them recommendations. What can we do to improve the situation? They have even measures which can impact these gender gaps, right? But some gaps were not identified, so we saw some inconsistency in this regard. That document was validated for local communities, and representatives of regional departments expressed their interest. Yes, we have norms in legislation, we have goals, we have tasks set by the state in line with the Euro integration requirements, but at local levels, people don't have enough skills to work with these issues. They are lacking some tools. So I hope that the synergy of civil society organizations and self-governing authorities will help to decrease and minimize these risks of adopting documents which will not cover specific groups of population. One more comment. We don't have any sanctions for non-implementing gender-related documents. So it looks quite weird that there are no penalties or fines for that. So we have to think about raising awareness campaigns, some advocacy campaigns, This is something which our expert society is doing now, and for over the last 10 years, we observed a significant shift. So we are moving towards the right goal, but with small steps. We have what to work on in the future, but it's a teamwork. We all should be involved. Gender approach, it's about the rights and opportunities to have your way to in your life. Well, thank you very much for all this work you are all doing in a systemic way in order to take into account all the gender-related aspects. Thank you very much for that, and I'd like to express my gratitude to all the viewers for your interest into this topic, and to express my gratitude to our defense forces for having this opportunity to meet and have such wonderful events. Thank you very much. We are working for our victory, and glory to Ukraine.